It was a quiet Thursday evening when Sophie, a driven and ambitious young journalist, sat at her apartment desk, eyes glued to her laptop. The soft hum of the city outside did little to mask the nervous energy that buzzed inside her. Sophie had been working on a sensitive story, an exposé about a local politician, Mark Chandler, who had been linked to a string of mysterious deaths and unreported disappearances. The deeper she dug, the more disturbing the connections seemed. But tonight was different. The silence of the night was pierced by the sudden ringing of her phone. Sophie glanced at the screen, an unfamiliar number, one she didn't recognize. Shrugging it off as another telemarketer, she answered. "Hello?" she said, trying to mask her irritation. The voice on the other end was low and breathy, almost unrecognizable, but it sent a chill down her spine. "You're close. Too close." Sophie frowned, pulling the phone away from her ear, not sure if she had heard correctly. She brought it back to her ear. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion and unease. "What do you mean?" The line went dead. Sophie sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. She shrugged it off. Just some prank call, or so she thought. The next morning, Sophie arrived at work, the newsroom buzzing with the usual chatter. She tried to push the strange phone call from her mind as she sat down at her desk. But something lingered, a faint unease that she couldn't shake. She clicked through her emails, skimming over story pitches when her phone rang again, the same strange number. "Hello?" she said, her voice sharper this time. "Don't trust what you see," the voice whispered, barely audible. Sophie felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Who was this? And why were they watching her? "What do you know about Mark Chandler?" she demanded, growing desperate. The voice on the other end chuckled, the sound almost hollow. "You don't know the full story, Sophie. The truth is darker than you think." Before she could respond, the line went dead again. Her mind raced. She had been following Chandler's connections for weeks, tracking his campaign finances, his secret meetings, the hush-hush dealings that seemed to link him to those mysterious deaths. But now, the pieces were beginning to fall into place. This wasn't just a story. It was a warning. Someone wanted her to stop digging. That evening, Sophie visited a local market to clear her mind. The vibrant colors and busy noise of the stalls offered a brief distraction from the growing tension. She was browsing through vegetables, lost in her thoughts, when she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She looked up, her heart pounding. A man stood across the market aisle, watching her intently. Sophie didn't recognize him, but something about the way he stared sent alarm bells ringing in her head. He quickly looked away, disappearing into the crowd. Her thoughts went straight to the phone calls. Could it be the same person? Her pulse quickened. Was she being followed? She paid for her groceries in a rush, barely able to keep her hands from shaking. As she stepped outside, Sophie scanned the street, half expecting to see the same man lurking nearby. But the sidewalk was empty, save for a few hurried pedestrians. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered. The next few days were a blur of growing paranoia. Every call from an unknown number was met with fear, and the voice on the other end always seemed to know more than it should. Sophie's colleagues noticed her distracted demeanor at work, but she couldn't bring herself to explain the creeping terror that followed her everywhere. Every corner, every alley, every step she took felt like it was being watched. One afternoon, Sophie found herself in a cafe across from her office, working on her article. She couldn't focus. the weight of everything pressing on her mind. As she typed, a figure entered her peripheral vision. She glanced up, and there he was, the same man from the market, sitting across the room, his eyes locked on her. Her breath caught in her throat. Was he following her? How had he found her here? Sophie quickly packed her things and left, her heart racing. She kept her head down as she exited, glancing behind her every few steps. She needed to get back to the office, needed to talk to someone. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she was in over her head.